Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about a fascinating topic. We're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons and a suspected Dungeons & Dragons killer that is coming out and why I think it will fail, all right, which is the MCDM game, which was born in the hatred of the OGL crisis. Oh, no, Scott. Matt Colville said that he was working on it before that. Yeah, too bad he didn't announce it before that, right? You know, that's cute. I like it, but like, you didn't say anything. Matthew Colville didn't say anything until the OGL crisis came out. And that means your game is marinated in hate, right? Your game is only came out because you got a swift kick in the butt from Hasbro D&D. Oh, Dungeons & Dragons is in trouble. Let's announce our game, and then people can think it's going to be and people think it's going to be a competitor, right? And I actually do think so. Basically, what does Matt Colville want from this? It's very interesting. You know what? I think I'm still thinking about that, right? Because the biggest problem that we have is nobody can find their two down there to actually compete with D&D directly. And I think Matt Colville hasn't done it either, right? I don't think he really wants this to be a D&D killer, but it doesn't matter because the OSR and the Indie want it to be a killer. And you can go right, you can go left, and you can find many videos of, you know, channels just saying, "Oh, can't wait for the D&D killer." Like it's already started, right? The D&D 6e is going to be MCDM, right? Like it's the D&D replacement, right? So it doesn't matter what Matthew Colville wants. This is going to be labeled. This is only going to be consumed as a D&D killer, right? Because that's what the OSR and the Indie want. Period. And no D&D people want this because they already have D&D. Why would any real Dungeons & Dragons fan want anything created by Matt Colville, right? Like Matt Colville has made millions, quite literally millions of dollars based on D&D hate, right? Like, and so people who are super frustrated and super aggravated about, any of the 10 crises, that D&D crises that dropped in 2023, that all, especially at this point at the end of 2023, appear to have done nothing but made D&D stronger, and the OSR and the Indie are farther behind than they've ever been. All right, so let's get into it. So let's talk. So what is the MCDM game? So this is really brilliant. Matthew Colville has defined what the MCDM game is. It's tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy. I've already done a video on tactical and cinematic. I've already done a video on heroic. Today I want to talk about fantasy. Let's talk about fantasy and why every single word in his infrastructure is a fail point for Matthew Colville, and why I believe the MCDM game absolutely will be stillborn, right? It'll arrive DOA, right? It'll plop over onto Drive-Thru RPG as another crusty fantasy copy that didn't matter, right? Just like Shadow Dark, just like Tales of the Valiant, just like there's just so many. It's incredible, right? Like just like EZD6, right? It's just another copy, right? It's not going to be 6e. It's not going to be the D&D killer. It's not going to be the replacement. Here's why. Let's get into it. Fantasy, right? Well, Scott, how could Matt Colville possibly screw up fantasy? Right? That's so simple. Well, here's why. Everything's taken. Everything's taken. So first of all, let's say the quiet part loud, right? What is Dungeons & Dragons? Well, one of the things it is, and one of the reasons why it's just so incredibly attractive to Americans, is Gary Gygax did something truly incredible. He systematized Tolkien, Tolkien. He systematized Lord of the Rings. He did it so obviously that they actually got sued at one point. They're like, "Hey man, like you're just systematizing our game." And Gary's like, "Well, you could have done it, but you didn't, right? So I did." We're like, and the reality is, TSR dealt with that problem, right? TSR dealt with that problem, right? And then they filed off the serial numbers, right? And at this point, they're fine legally because they filed off the serial numbers. But in my humble opinion, make no mistake, Dungeons & Dragons is simply systematized Tolkien, right? So, and then Dungeons & Dragons has gone on beyond that and done a little bit, right? And what they've done, and what Dungeons and Dragons really did, was it fully Americanized fantasy, right? And they have, and really at this point, Dungeons and Dragons really owns everything that is American fantasy. People connect it to Dungeons and Dragons, right? Now the problem is Matthew Colville comes in and he has to ask, what is fantasy, right? And first of all, if he does anything that even looks like Tolkien, if he does anything that even looks like American fantasy, people are like, well, thanks for nothing. This is just D&D all over again, which is exactly what is making Tales of the Valiant suck so hard right now. Everybody's like, hey, we thought you guys were going to do something real. We thought you guys were actually, you talked a good game when the OGL crisis was up. We thought you were going to actually do something real. Turns out they did nothing real. Like, it's a bad copy, right? Like, and so, and boy, you could see the excitement burning off of Tales of the Valiant quickly. Go check out a channel that covers them. They're like, oh yeah, it kind of sucks. Or like it's bad. It's bad, right? So the problem is fantasy what, right? So who has actually created distinct fantasy that is distinct from Dungeons and Dragons and distinct from Lord of the Rings, which frankly, D&D really kind of completely subsumed Tolkien fantasy and then Americanized it, right? And now Dungeons and Dragons owns fantasy. It owns it. There's no game in the world that even competes with it on a fantasy base, right? Because it, like, skeletons, dragons, goblins, ogres and orcs. D&D owns it, right? Like they have completely owned the space, right? So now Matt Colville is jammed to the wall. And what does he have to do? He has to fix this problem. He's very jammed to the wall, right? And so how does he fix this, right? So here's what he did, okay? Actually, here's what has been done. I've only seen one game that actually has a unique fantasy world, right? It's called Simba Room. It's absolutely fantastic. It's dark European fantasy. It is very distinct. It does not look like Tolkien. It is very good. It is logically cohesive. It is artistically beautiful, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody plays Simba Room, right? Among a extremely small, like, it's niche in a niche market, right? And actually, I need to stop saying that. I actually don't believe that Dungeons and Dragons is niche anymore. We just had we had a $250 million blockbuster, right? We're not, Dungeons and Dragons banner is flown high every time the largest streaming show in the world, right, it goes on. And also you're like, yeah, but there's gaps between. That's covered by Legends of Vox Machina, with Jeff Bezos carrying Dungeons and Dragons stories directly to Prime viewers. We are no longer, D&D is not niche. Tabletop role-playing games are niche, definitely, right? And OSR and the indie are niche within a niche, right? D&D is not niche. Tabletop role-playing games are niche. And you're like, wait a second, Scott, D&D is a tabletop role-playing game. No. Dungeons and Dragons is bigger than tabletop role-playing games. If you walk down any mainstream and you had $1,000 in your pocket and you said, tell me what D&D is, if you do, I'm going to give the $1,000 to you, they'd be like, oh, that's something that people do. It's some nerds get in their basement and they play elves and I think there's some weird dice, right? I think my cousin plays it, right? Here's your grand, right? If you said, hey, what's a tabletop role-playing game? You would go to the end of that main street with that $1,000 in your pocket, right? They were like, I have no idea what that is, right? So here's where we land, right? He has to create fantasy that is distinct from Tolkien and is distinct from American fantasy, or it's just a bad copy. And that is the issue, right? He's in a spaceship right now, and he is orbiting a moon, and that moon is bad copy. He's got to escape the orbit. He's got to escape the gravity of bad copy. And it is going to be outrageously hard, right? And the only reason I'm taking joy in this is everybody talked smack at the beginning of the year. OGL crisis came along and they're like, this is it, everybody. It's going to be so easy to beat Dungeons and Dragons because it sucks. It doesn't suck. It has art that is so good, people don't even think it's humanly possible to create it, right? Which it is humanly possible. Its artists are literally the best in the world. So good that their art fools software that you can't tell if it's AI or not. I mean, that's astounding, right? Its writing is the best in the world. Its layout is the best in the world. Its rules are the best in the world. And people have been talking smack for decades. They've bargled around, and now they're finding out. And this is it. Matt Colville's got 18 months to get it done. And I say every single word of his core structure is broken. He has problems in every world. Tactical and cinematic are juxtaposed. Heroic, he has no ability to deliver a heroic game because he's an atheist or an agnostic. He doesn't even know what a hero is. And last, fantasy is owned by Dungeons & Dragons. And everybody who tries to build their own fails miserably. Symbaroum it's fantastic, right? Nobody plays it. Nobody cares. Nobody knows it, right? It's buried in obscurity. Matthew Colville is going to have a very, very rough time. Very rough time. He's attempting the impossible, right? And the reason we're talking about it is I have gained a lot more respect for him. I think if anybody's going to do it, it could be him, and not even because it's him, but because of James Introcaso. And good Lord, if they hired Ingrid Bernal, it's done, right? Like, but neither Matthew Colville or James Introcaso is humble enough to bring that dude in, because he knows more about creating he's from Index Card RPG. And thank God, that is the only saving grace of D&D, is that nobody realizes that they need a piano player, and Liberace's sitting right over there, right? Like, there's one dude in the world who could actually beat D&D. It is Ingrid Bernal. But he's an artist without a patron. And honestly, I wish that somebody would figure this out. And if Matthew Colville hires Ingrid Bernal from, Hankrin Farinale, same dude, from Index Card RPG, he could overcome every problem we just talked about. I don't think he'll do it. I don't think anybody will do it. Like, Index Card RPG is a buried treasure. Nobody knows about it. Everybody digs, the diamond vein is 30 feet down. Everybody digs 29 feet down and thinks the fill dirt is the payday. We'll see what happens. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.